childhood friend Omitted inviting me to her wedding after years of loyalty, showing me that our friendship might have been one-sided. One of my work colleagues is actually a lifelong friend of mine, someone I've known since childhood. We grew up on the same street, went to the same school, and when I was desperate for a job after university, she was the one who told me about an opening where she worked. I applied, got the job, and now, years later, we're still working together. It's a small, male-dominated company, so after I started, we naturally gravitated toward each other and got even closer. We always take our lunches together, constantly stop by each other's desks to chat, and have definitely become known around the office as basically inseparable. Last year, she got engaged to her long-term partner, and I was seriously over the moon for her. She had such a rough time a couple of years back. She lost 2 family members in quick succession, and I made it my mission to be there for her through the worst of it. She'd cry with me every day for weeks, and I always made sure she knew I was available to listen. I even voluntarily took on roughly a third of her workload, just so she could take time off without having to worry about everything piling up. Seeing her happy now, genuinely smiling and excited again, especially with the wedding coming up, has really warmed my heart. Naturally, ever since her engagement, she's talked a lot about wedding plans. I've basically been her sounding board for every little detail, especially during our lunches. When she finally booked her venue, she was so giddy but mysteriously refused to say where it was, telling me she wanted it to be a surprise when the invitations came out. Her wedding is in 2 weeks now, and I've long since stopped expecting an invitation to show up in my mailbox. I know exactly when she sent them out. She told me all about delivering them and keeps showing me the gifts people have begun buying from her registry. I feel ridiculous admitting this, but the more I think about it, the more hurt I am by not being included. It's a big wedding, and she's invited some other colleagues I didn't even realize she was close to. She's never acknowledged the fact that I'm not invited, and at this point, it just feels incredibly awkward to even ask. Honestly, this whole situation has made me re-examine our entire friendship. I'm starting to see this pattern, one where I've always been there for her, working through decisions together, listening to her vent, standing up for her when colleagues were out of line, even saving her slices of cake in the office if she was out. I can't remember a single moment where she's actually done anything for me in return. When we talk, I suddenly recognize she never listens. When I finish telling her something, she'll just go on talking about herself, as if I never spoke. Whenever I mention something about myself or what I've been up to, she just nods or quickly steers the conversation back to herself. That's when it hit me. It feels like she doesn't actually care about me. She just wants someone to talk at, and it doesn't matter to her who that person is. After investing so much into this friendship for years, this realization cut me deeply. I truly feel used. Work, which used to be so much fun because of our closeness, now feels incredibly lonely. I've stopped having lunch with her, and any time she tries to start a conversation, I politely cut it short and get back to work. The worst part? She doesn't even seem to notice. Despite everything, I do still wish her well. I'm genuinely glad her life has turned around and she's found happiness, but I just feel so lost in the aftermath. Am I being too harsh or unreasonable just because I'm hurt? Do I even have the right to feel this way, knowing weddings are limited in size and people have to make tough choices about whom to invite? I honestly don't know if there's any way back from this. To clarify, she hand-delivered the invitations at work, so it definitely couldn't have been lost in the mail. The real reason I haven't asked her directly is because I'm terrified of tough conversations. I'm a complete doormat when it comes to conflict. And yes, I did invite her to my own wedding years ago, but maybe she feels things have changed since then. This whole ordeal has made me realize the bigger issue at play is my inability to confront problems in my relationships. I have withdrawn from friendships before because I felt hurt but never confronted the person about it, which just isn't fair. When I have to face uncomfortable conversations, I panic, I can't find the right words, my mouth goes dry, my hands shake. If the problem is so intense that I can't even ask a close friend a simple question, then it's definitely something I need to face and work on. For now, I feel I'll just try to put my feelings aside and observe if the one-sidedness is real. If so, I guess it's just a life lesson learned, but if we can rebuild, I'll need to handle that as it comes. Update 1. It took me a few days to figure out the best way to approach this whole situation, but yesterday I finally had lunch with her again and decided it was time for the conversation. I started off by casually asking, "So, you've sent all your invitations out now, haven't you?" The way her face immediately registered panic told me everything I needed to know. She really didn't want me to start down this road. She told me she'd sent them all, so I asked if that meant now she could show me her venue. She showed me the website, let me scroll through the photo gallery, and described in detail all the flowers, decorations, and how everything was going to be laid out. The place looked nice, just a country hotel with some pretty gardens, but I honestly couldn't understand what all the secrecy had been about. I kept probing a little. I asked about who she'd invited from work, and, noticeably, the list didn't include me. I smiled and told her I was looking forward to seeing the photos, so I could see how it all turned out. She didn't correct me or mention that I'd be there in person. At that point, I was completely certain my lack of invitation wasn't an oversight. When I finally switched the subject and asked if she was excited about her honeymoon and getting a rest after all the wedding stress, I saw the huge wave of relief pass over her. "So, it's official, I'm not invited." I took some time to think it over and decided not to ask why. Honestly, the reason is pretty obvious. She doesn't consider us anything more than colleagues, and I've just misread our relationship. There were other theories swirling in my mind. Maybe her fiancé is the jealous type, or maybe she associates me with some past grief, but from everything I know of her and our history, I'm sure it's just that we weren't as close as I thought. What really bugs me, though, is that she didn't dial down the wedding talk with someone she had no intention of inviting, or even bother to mention why I wasn't going to be included. However, I don't want awkwardness at work, and turning this into an issue just seems pathetic, needy, and unprofessional. The risk is too high that she'd badmouth me to colleagues or mutual friends. Keeping my feelings to myself and avoiding a mess feels a lot easier. This is her once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I have no desire to be a source of drama or to do anything that puts a damper on her happiness. Honestly, I'm okay with not going. It was never about wanting to attend the wedding, it was about having to face the fact that I'd been naive, taken for granted, and maybe a little foolish for investing so much energy and emotion into this relationship. That's not all on her. She was never obligated to be my friend. Reflecting on everything actually helped me work through my feelings, and when I went back to work on Monday, I felt calmer, and more detached from the whole thing. Looking back over our relationship, I can see now that she's always been somewhat self-involved, entitled, and narcissistic. Being a bride has only amplified those qualities, but they were always there. Besides helping me get my job, which I am genuinely grateful for, she's never really reciprocated. She won't listen or help me through my problems the way I always do for her, and if I need her help at work, she refuses. She's got a few office enemies, and even though I always noticed her less appealing traits, I'd shrug them off and defend her. But now that I've started to put some distance between us, it's clear as day, she's just not a very nice person, and I'm genuinely okay with moving on. She hardly seems to have noticed the growing distance, or maybe she has and she's relieved I'm giving her some space. My plan is just to keep that up. If she ever asks about it or tries to bring our friendship back to life, then I'll clear the air and tell her how I've been feeling. But if we just keep drifting apart, all the better. It's sad to lose a friend, and I know it'll take some time for me to adjust and feel comfortable with the change, but I'm lucky enough to have other, genuine friendships and a workplace full of wonderful colleagues I can get to know better. One thing all of this has really highlighted for me, something I only truly realized after reflecting on it, is how much I need to work on my fear of confrontation. I have to learn to speak up as things happen, so little things don't fester and turn into huge issues that require emotional, serious talks. I need to be able to navigate difficult conversations without breaking down, since anxiety tends to cloud my message, makes the process distressing, and tempts me to avoid the truth. A couple of assertiveness books have been recommended to me, and I've picked them up. I'm even considering some coaching or therapy to help push myself forward in this area. Not for anyone else's sake, but my own. I owe it to myself not to let life just happen to me, or avoid being honest out of fear. Another thing that became clear in this whole messy process is just how much I've fallen into the role of a permanent listener, often for people who are happy to lean on me but don't actually reciprocate. While I noticed I was always there for those one-off venting sessions, I never really examined whether I was being taken advantage of as a long-term listening ear. So, in the past few days, I've started really assessing my other friendships, looking for similar patterns, asking myself if anyone else is using me, or if I've been guilty of not giving back as much as I should in my own relationships. There are a few boundaries I need to set, one friendship where I need to give a bit more, and another where I definitely need to step back. Overall, this experience has taught me an invaluable lesson about what healthy relationships should look like, and I'm genuinely grateful for that. Update 2. Since my story was featured in a YouTube video yesterday, a flood of messages poured in, and I realized it's time to share what has happened since. The colleague at the heart of all this and I still work together. Over the years, she's had 2 children, each time taking a year off for maternity leave, so her presence at work has actually been pretty sporadic. In the early days, I found myself avoiding her. If I'm honest, I was behaving childishly, giving her the silent treatment, thinking that by ignoring her I could somehow hurt her the way I'd been hurt. In retrospect, that was a pitiful move, especially since, with supreme irony, she seemed completely oblivious to my cold shoulder. But then, of course, 2020 arrived like a storm. We both ended up working from home. Soon after, she was off on maternity leave again, and by the time we were sharing an office space once more, all that old drama had faded into the background, dissolved by the passage of time and the chaos of the world. Now, things are easy, we're friendly, no grudges left, but I'm far more aware of the nature of our relationship. I don't overextend myself, and I don't pine for anything more than just pleasant office chit-chat. In the meantime, as the company expanded, so did my circle of friends. I built a great network of work buddies, we head out to lunch, frequent the pub on Fridays, and sometimes spend our weekends together. I've always cherished the friends I've made in life, but with this group, I suddenly had a whole new set of wonderful people I got to see every weekday. A highlight among these friendships, one of the women in our group got married just 4 months ago. Not only did she invite me to her wedding, but also to her bachelorette party. I even made the photographer's official list for a group shot with her, alongside our other work friends she held close. After a few celebratory drinks, she threw her arms around me and told me how thrilled she was I could be there. Another friend recently got engaged, and though her wedding is still a ways off, she's already told me, without me even having to ask, that I'll be on the guest list. Meanwhile, my old colleague has found a new work confidant, someone else she now leans on when things at work get rough or she just needs a shoulder to cry on. When frustrations or tears hit, I'm no longer her go-to. Honestly? That's fine by me. It had grown emotionally exhausting being in that spot for her for so long. Have I become a doormat? Not anymore. Growing has been the theme of these years. For one thing, I learned that age really does grant you a certain peace. The day I turned 30 felt like a transformative moment for my self-esteem and inner calm. I began to find real confidence. In the past, I was terrified of disappointing anyone, so I overcompensated and tried too hard. But eventually I realized I was already a good friend to people. The more genuinely kind friends I met, people who liked me simply for being me, the more confidently I could show up in the world as myself. With that confidence, I found my voice. At first it started with small things, speaking up over little issues, expressing what I wanted or felt. When nothing terrible happened as a result, it got easier each time. The fear of losing friends if I simply spoke authentically started to fade. No great drama has occurred, but I'm certain that if it did, I'd handle it so much better now. A lot of people have asked me for advice about friendship after hearing my story, so here's what I've learned. Healthy friendships are a balance of giving and taking. If you look back and all the weight of effort sits on one side, it's worth confronting that. Think about it, when was the last time your friend did something thoughtful for you, or vice versa? Who usually reaches out first, travels the extra mile, moves the conversation along? Would you call them if you truly needed help, and would they answer? Reflecting honestly on these questions, from time to time, helps both people. You don't want to always be the taker, but you shouldn't always be the giver, either, or the bond will wear thin. Of course, you need perspective. If your friend is going through tough times, it's normal for them to need more from you, not have a lot to give back. But ask yourself, what are they like in good times? If roles were reversed, would they step up for you? That's what really matters. Also, not everyone will be, or is supposed to be, your best friend. Some friendships are light and easy, just good people for a hangout or a laugh. Don't expect every friend to be a soulmate or confidant, it isn't realistic. There's so much joy in these casual connections, sometimes you just need someone to brighten your day for a while. These friendships might lack depth, but that's okay, they don't require much investment and there's no pain if you wind up drifting away as life shifts. But protect your heart. Don't give all of yourself to everyone. Choose wisely who gets that privilege, because truly close friends will be few and precious. That doesn't diminish what you share with them, it makes it more meaningful that you chose them deliberately. For anyone out there aching over the loss of a friendship, a friend who never really was your friend, hear this, you're not just feeling hurt, but probably embarrassed and confused, too. I want to give you the biggest virtual hug. I promise, it does get better. Update 3. I honestly thought this chapter of my life was closed, but something happened last week that has completely turned everything on its head. I'm still processing it all, and I'm not even sure how I feel about any of it yet. So, remember my old colleague, the one who didn't invite me to her wedding? Well, she's been back from her second maternity leave for about 6 months now. As I mentioned before, things between us had settled into this comfortable, distant politeness. We'd exchange pleasantries, maybe chat about work stuff, but nothing deeper. I thought that was how it would stay forever. Last Tuesday, I was working late, most of the office had cleared out by around 6 p.m., but I was trying to finish up a presentation for the next morning. I was completely absorbed in my work when I heard someone crying. Not just sniffling, but proper sobbing coming from the direction of her desk. Now, the old me would have immediately rushed over to comfort her. But I've learned my boundaries, so I hesitated. Part of me wanted to just pack up and leave, it wasn't my problem anymore. But the crying got worse, and honestly, my conscience got the better of me. I couldn't just ignore someone in obvious distress, even if our friendship had ended badly. I walked over and found her with her head in her hands, mascara streaked down her cheeks. When she looked up and saw me, she seemed almost startled, like she'd forgotten anyone else was still there. "Are you okay?" I asked, though it was obviously a stupid question. That's when everything came tumbling out. And I mean everything. Her marriage, the one I wasn't invited to celebrate, is apparently falling apart. Has been for over a year, actually. Her husband had an affair with someone from his work, and she only found out about it 3 months after their second child was born. She's been trying to make it work for the sake of the kids, but he's been distant, cruel even. She suspects he's still seeing the other woman. But here's the part that really got to me. She told me that not inviting me to the wedding was the biggest regret of her life. She said she knew it was wrong even as she was doing it, but her fiancé had made all these comments about her being too close to people at work, specifically mentioning me. He was jealous of our friendship, convinced there was something inappropriate about how much time we spent together. To keep the peace, she made the decision to exclude me, thinking it would somehow make him more secure. She said she realized immediately after the wedding that she'd made a terrible mistake. That looking around at all the people there, I was the one person she actually wanted to talk to about how she was feeling. She'd wanted to apologize to me so many times over the years, but she was too ashamed and didn't know how to bring it up. I sat there listening to all of this, feeling this weird mix of vindication and sadness. On one hand, I'd been right all along, our friendship had meant something to her. But on the other hand, she'd thrown it away for a man who turned out to be a complete waste of space. The conversation went on for nearly 2 hours. She told me about feeling isolated and lonely, about how she'd never found another friend at work who actually listened to her the way I used to. She admitted that she'd taken our friendship for granted, and that losing it had been one of the hardest parts of everything that followed. I found myself in this strange position where I was comforting her again, but this time it felt different. I wasn't that same person who would take on all her problems as my own. I could listen and be sympathetic without drowning in her emotions. When she finally asked if we could try to rebuild our friendship, I was honest with her. I told her that I'd grown a lot since then, that I had other friends now who valued me properly, and that I couldn't just go back to the way things were before. But I also said that maybe we could start fresh, slowly, and with clear boundaries this time. The weird part? I think I actually meant it. Not because I'm desperate for her friendship again, but because I can see now that we were both flawed back then. She was selfish and took me for granted, but I was also a people pleaser who never stood up for myself. Maybe we're both different people now. Since that conversation, she's been making an effort. Small things, bringing me coffee, asking about my weekend, actually listening when I talk about my life. It feels tentative and careful, like we're both testing the waters. But here's where things get complicated. Yesterday, she asked me to be her divorce lawyer's character witness. Apparently, her husband is trying to get primary custody of the kids, and he's painting her as unstable and friendless to make his case. She needs people who can testify to her character and her ability to maintain relationships. I haven't given her an answer yet. Part of me thinks this is exactly the kind of drama I swore I'd avoid. But another part of me thinks that maybe this is different, that this time, I'd be helping someone who's genuinely trying to change, rather than enabling someone who just takes and takes. I've got a few days to decide. My therapist, yes, I finally got one after all this, thinks it could actually be a healthy test of my new boundaries. If I can help her through this crisis while still maintaining my sense of self, then maybe I really have grown as much as I think I have. The strangest part of all this is that I'm not angry anymore. I thought I would be, hearing that my instincts about our friendship had been right all along. But instead, I just feel sad, I guess. Sad for the time we lost, sad for the person she was married to, and sad that it took her marriage falling apart for her to realize what she'd thrown away. I don't know what's going to happen next. Whether we'll actually rebuild something meaningful or whether this is just her reaching out because she's desperate and I'm familiar. But for the first time in years, I'm curious to find out rather than afraid of being hurt again. Maybe that's growth. Update 4. I can't believe I'm back here writing another update, but so much has happened in the past month that I honestly don't know who else to tell. I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that's unfolded. First, about being her character witness, I decided to do it. My therapist was right, it felt like a good test of whether I could help someone while maintaining my boundaries. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after she asked me, which gave us time to work on rebuilding some trust. And I have to admit, she really was making an effort. She'd check in on me when I seemed stressed about my own work projects, she'd remember little things I mentioned about my weekend plans, and for the first time in years, our conversations felt somewhat balanced. The custody hearing itself was eye-opening. Her husband showed up with his lawyer and this woman I didn't recognize, tall, blonde, probably about our age. I assumed it was just moral support until I saw them holding hands in the hallway. The audacity of bringing his affair partner to his own custody hearing was breathtaking. My colleague, I'll call her Sarah for clarity, looked like she was going to be sick when she saw them together. I gave my testimony honestly, talked about how she'd been a reliable colleague, how she'd supported me through difficult times at work, and how I'd seen her dedication to her children during her maternity leaves. It felt good to speak the truth without feeling like I was being manipulated into it. But here's where things get absolutely insane. The hearing went well for Sarah, she was awarded primary custody with him getting alternate weekends. We decided to grab dinner afterward to celebrate, and she seemed lighter than I'd seen her in months. We were at this little Italian place near the courthouse, just catching up and laughing about some ridiculous thing that happened at work, when I excused myself to use the restroom. On my way back to the table, I nearly walked straight into someone coming out of the men's room. I looked up to apologize and found myself face to face with Sarah's ex-husband. For a split second, we just stared at each other in mutual recognition and awkwardness. "You're Sarah's friend from work," he said. It wasn't really a question. "Yes," I replied, trying to keep things civil despite everything I knew about him. That's when he said something that made my blood run cold. "You know, you're not the first work friend she's gotten inappropriately close to." Before I could ask what he meant, he continued, "The real reason I didn't want her inviting you to the wedding wasn't jealousy. It's because she has a pattern. There was another colleague, before you, a guy named Mark. She was obsessed with him for about 2 years. Same thing, lunches every day, staying late to work on projects together, constantly texting. His wife ended up calling Sarah and telling her to back off. I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. That's not. We were never inappropriate." He shrugged. "Maybe not physically. But Sarah doesn't understand boundaries. She gets fixated on people, especially when her life gets stressful. You were her emotional affair partner, whether you realized it or not. I wanted to argue with him, to defend our friendship, but suddenly so many things started making sense. Why she'd been so secretive about wedding plans with me but not other colleagues. Why she'd get weird when I mentioned dating or relationships. Why she'd monopolize so much of my time and emotional energy. I mumbled something about needing to get back to dinner and practically fled back to the table. Sarah was scrolling through her phone, and when she looked up and saw my face, she immediately knew something was wrong. Did something happen? You look like you've seen a ghost. I sat down heavily and tried to process everything. Part of me wanted to confront her right there about what her ex-husband had said, but another part of me wondered if he was just trying to cause trouble. After all, he just lost custody of his kids, maybe he was lashing out. Instead, I deflected and said I was just tired from the long day. But for the rest of dinner, I found myself analyzing every interaction we'd ever had through this new lens. Had our friendship really been inappropriate? Had I been naive about her intentions? The next few days at work were torture. I kept catching myself watching Sarah, looking for signs of this supposed pattern. And honestly, some things started bothering me that never had before. The way she'd light up when I arrived in the morning. How she'd find excuses to stop by my desk even when she didn't need anything work-related. The fact that she knew my schedule better than some of my actual friends did. But then something else happened that changed everything again. Sarah came to my desk on Friday afternoon, looking nervous and fidgety. "Can we talk privately?" she asked. "Maybe grab coffee after work?" I agreed, though I was dreading the conversation. We went to this quiet cafe a few blocks from our office, and she seemed to be working up the courage to say something the entire walk there. Finally, once we were seated with our drinks, she took a deep breath and said, "I need to tell you something, and I'm afraid you're going to hate me for it." My heart started racing. Was she going to confirm what her ex-husband had said? Admit to some inappropriate feelings I'd been oblivious to? "I lied to you," she said quietly. "About the wedding, about why you weren't invited." I stared at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "You said your fiancé was jealous of our friendship." "That was part of it, but not the whole truth." She was picking at her napkin, not meeting my eyes. "The real reason is that I knew Mark was going to be there." "Mark?" The name hit me like a punch to the gut. My ex-colleague. The one James, my ex-husband, was always suspicious about. She finally looked up at me. James was right to be suspicious. Mark and we had an emotional affair. For almost 2 years. It never got physical, but it was real, and it was wrong. I felt sick. "And you thought I'd..." "What? Cause drama at your wedding?" "No," she said quickly. "No, that's not it at all. I was terrified that seeing Mark again would make me realize I was marrying the wrong person. And I knew that if you were there, if you saw how I acted around him, you'd know immediately. You always could read me better than anyone." The pieces were starting to fall into place, but not in a way that made me feel better. "So you excluded me to hide your affair?" "To hide my feelings," she corrected. The affair was already over by then. Mark had transferred to a different department specifically because his wife found out and demanded it. But I still had feelings for him. And I knew James suspected something, which is why he was so paranoid about my work friendships. Including ours. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process this revelation. Finally, I managed to ask, "What happened at the wedding?" Sarah's face crumpled. Exactly what I was afraid would happen. The moment I saw Mark, all those feelings came flooding back. I spent my entire wedding reception wishing I was marrying someone else. James could tell something was wrong, he's not stupid. That's when the real problems in our marriage started. And the affair he had? Revenge, she said simply. He found out about Mark about 6 months after the wedding. I confessed everything during one of our fights. So he went out and had his own affair to get back at me. I didn't know what to say. Everything I thought I knew about the situation had been turned upside down again. The friendship I'd mourned, the betrayal I'd felt, the growth I thought I'd achieved, it had all been based on incomplete information. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because James is trying to get the custody ruling overturned. His lawyer thinks they can prove I'm an unfit mother because of the Mark situation. And because..." She paused, looking terrified. "Because I'm scared I'm doing it again. With you." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "I mean that ever since we started rebuilding our friendship, I've been looking forward to seeing you every day more than I should. I mean that when you agreed to be my character witness, I felt more grateful and cared for than I'd felt in years. I mean that I've been thinking about you in ways that friends shouldn't think about each other." I felt like I was going to throw up. "Sarah." "I know," she said quickly. "I know it's wrong. I know I have a problem. That's why I'm telling you. Because I can't lose my kids, and I can't keep hurting people I care about. I think I need professional help, but I also think I need to step back from our friendship before I ruin it again." I left the cafe in a daze. Everything felt surreal, like I was living in someone else's life. The friend I'd been mourning for years had essentially just confessed to having romantic feelings for me, both then and now. The betrayal I'd felt about the wedding wasn't about her not valuing our friendship, It was about her valuing it too much, in all the wrong ways. I haven't been back to work since that conversation. I called in sick on Monday and Tuesday, claiming food poisoning. I need time to think, to figure out what this means and what I want to do about it. Part of me feels vindicated. I was right that our friendship meant something significant to her. But another part of me feels deeply uncomfortable with the idea that what I thought was genuine friendship was actually something else entirely on her end. My therapist has squeezed me in for an emergency session tomorrow. I have no idea what I'm going to tell her, or what I'm going to do about Sarah, or how I'm going to face going back to work. All I know is that this situation is so much more complicated than I ever could have imagined.